Hi all. Welcome again. Sorry about the the internet. It was crazy. I apologize for the short stop. And please, I welcome you all back to this Instagram live. Please stay connected. Stay on the line. Today, I thought I would never encounter this because all the Instagram live I did, I've always managed this well. But I sincerely apologize to my guest, Michael Kabuni, and I'm gonna invite him again now. Um, yes, so I will invite Michael in, and then we can start the conversation. I also apologize for the noises at the back. Those are the dogs. So I apologize. I'm in my house and I'm doing this Instagram live. Probably next time we'll be in a good studio to be able to do good. So thank you so much, Michael, for being so cool with me, just changing phones and trying to get you back online. So I'm grateful for that. But let's continue the conversation on where we left off about young people participating in politics. We have seen, I have seen, like in my community, young people are being used as people who are supposed to vote, not vote, but support candidates and bring them into the arena or in the community, rather than them leading the communities to, participate in enrollment or participating, election awareness or whatnot. They're just following a typical, I mean, not a particular political leader around and carrying their bags and whatnot. It's just my village view of how our young people, especially in the rural areas, are being treated when it comes to elections. What is your opinion as an academic? Do you think it is an issue? Do you think it is something that should be addressed or should be made aware of to the policymakers or to people who are actually leading in this space to be able to get young people in and make them aware that they are not just puppets to be used when someone wants them to be used, but they're actually their vote actually counts and their value is of big worth in the communities and the families that they represent. So please would like to hear your view on that.
Yeah, so I was talking about it when we had the internet glitch, and like that's generally true, but not having their names on a common roll is not their fault in most of the times, because the electoral commission has been doing a really poor job with common roll updates. Like even as we speak now, some LLGs are trying to get their common rolls updated. That should have been done like a long time ago. And the election was delayed. The nomination issue of writs were delayed for 3 weeks. And, the electoral commission kept coming up with various explanations. The last one was, Sam Basil just died. So that's a very silly explanation. And people who know what's happening could just see right through. It wasn't because Sam Basil has died. 2 days would have been enough. It's just that they were so unprepared that they used the death of Sam Basil as an excuse to buy time 1 week and try to sort these things out. So it's sad that they could use the death of a national leader as an excuse to try to fix their mess. So young people, if they don't have their names on a common roll, it's not their fault. If they've turned 18 in the last 5 years and you didn't have a reliable, common roll, or you didn't update a common roll in the last 5 years, then they missed out. So it's not, their fault that their names are not on a common roll. And there's this, there's more to it, but I'm not getting into it. How the process that they've adopted in the last couple of months to try to speed this up was not really good. So that's the first, reason why, people are not really concerned about young people, especially. If they don't have their names on a common roll, it's not because they're fault. The second reason is that in some parts of Papua New Guinea, like especially in the islands, common roles sometimes doesn't matter. People, so long as you have the ballot papers there, they'll fill it up. So let's say if you're a young man and you show up there and your name is not on the common roll, you're not supposed to vote. But then they will vote anyways. So if common roll was something that prevented you from voting, then you would put pressure to have the common rolls updated. But if you can show up and just vote, then there's really no incentive to try to push for common roll, update common roles to be updated, because you'll vote anyways. And that's part of the problem in some parts of Papua New Guinea, is that people just show up and vote. Now, we looked at the data for 2017 election. Very interesting. The New Guinea Islands. In the New Guinea Islands, the voter population is high, but the people who show up to vote is very low. So I don't know why, but they just not. So you will see the data in the islands, region. The names on the common roll, or the census, at least the last census that we had, and in the common ballot papers are given, distributed based on this information. The census data, which is like outdated by almost 20 years, and common roll, in the last common roll, and then you see the voting population of a province or a district, and you distribute the common rolls based on that. And what we found with the islands region is that you have voter, the number of voting age population that at least an estimate, and then you give common rolls based on that. But on election day, it actually exceeds the number of estimated eligible voters. So you have actually more people voting, even though the eligible voter list, at least, is low. So that's islands region. And then you go to islands region, like the New Guinea Islands regions. You have more ballot papers and few people voting. And we don't know why. Like Bougainville, last election with Bougainville was that you had ballot papers still around. Ballot papers were given at least, they've estimated the number of eligible voters, and they've given the ballot papers. But most of those ballot papers were returned because people didn't show up to vote. Well, people did show up to vote, but they didn't. It was less than the ballot papers that were issued. And, you can speculate on why they're doing that. Probably because they just want independence. They don't want to participate in PNG politics. We don't know. But so it varies across region and across provinces. But yes, young people are mostly used, to campaign for the candidates. Some of them are old. They don't go to, Papua New Guinea terrains are really rough. You have to go by dinghy. You have to climb mountains, cliffs. Those are done mostly by young people. And to not have their names on the common roll is really sad. And that for them to somehow see election as, their role in the elections is only limited to campaigning, and doing the bidding for the candidates. That's really sad if that's the understanding in the rural areas.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm like very, very interested in this topic, is because like I believe in young people. Like I believe in the power that they have to make decisions on their own when they're given the right amount of information, when they're empowered enough to be able to take that stand and to know that their vote actually counts. Their vote actually will contribute to the bigger change in their communities, in their electoral level, as well as the national level as well. So for them to be able to think that way, that their value is associated with being just that, like what you have shared, just being that person for a political candidate or someone, then it's like like they don't feel worthy all throughout, except to that particular time where they are being used for something. So for this context is election, and I don't, maybe I will take this time to also like not focus only on election but on all spheres of all sectors of the country, or in the institutions of the society, where, for example, like youth participation is not only declining in the election process, if I can put it that way, it's also like in education, right? Also in education, also in the workforce, also in policy making, decision making, and probably also grassroots mobilization. And why I say grassroots mobilization is not like you will have young people who believe in a cause and who mobilize themselves to take ownership of an issue and then try to come up with a solution. I kind of I'm referring to the particular scenario as grassroots mobilization. Well, you won't see most of that happening because they're just waiting for someone to tell them what to do. And that is very sad because at the grassroots level, you will see a lot of people right now are young people. Like they make up most of the population in the community. But they're not being able to think for themselves. They're not being able to make decisions on their own because I don't know if it is something that is related to how we were being brought up as Melanesian, as Papua New Guineans, where we were not given the trust to be able to speak up for ourselves, to be able to know from the very beginning that our voice matters. So it is concerning to me as a young person. I mean, of course, I will not be young anymore. I'm like kind of like rushing into my 30s, so it's gonna be yeah. Yeah. So like just looking back, I will be able to say I was young before, but just looking at that spectrum of the population, it kind of like worries me because we, like Nelson mentioned in the comments, that we make up the 60% of the population, yet we don't have the upper hand in decision making, especially for those who are already capable of making decisions, for those who are already capable of sitting in decision making tables. So, do you think, in your opinion, what would you say about the declining participation of young people? You say it's not our fault. It is the people who are supposed to be registering us, their fault. In your honest opinion as an academic, what would you say is the way forward starting now?
Yeah,
Starting now. Starting
probably
this year and
not
within this
a
year and the
view,
next.
not a view of an academic, just my view.
Okay, your view.
Academic puts a lot of pressure to find the right answers. Yeah. So
Your view, okay. Your view.
I think awareness and educating the young people is the first step. Like we just talked about the election and
Yeah.
young people, especially in the rural areas. And I mean, unfortunately, it's not only the rural areas. We'll talk about educated crop as well. In the rural areas, they see their kind of, when election comes around, that their responsibility is to conduct, campaign, do the bidding for their uncle who is the candidate or their wanto. They don't see that as an opportunity to express their power to change or to shape politics. And you can say the same thing about most of the things and most of the issues in a country where young people are not participating. It's because they they don't know that they can make a difference. They are not empowered. They don't think it's their it's something that they can participate in. So it's educating young people, conducting awareness, impressing upon them that their voice matters, and that it's very critical that they be involved. And that's the first bit. The second part is for those who are in authority to actually be proactive in engaging young people. So I just recently completed a study. So I was looking at Bougainville. I actually traveled to Bougainville before I came here. And I was in Bougainville. I talked to women, I talked to young people, and also in Papua New Guinea, I talked to. So we're trying to see how women are involved in the post-referendum consultation phase. So after the referendum, Bougainville voted for independence, 97.7%, I think. And now the next phase is consultation. So the consultation between the two governments, Bougainville government and Papua New Guinea government, to find a political settlement. So I was talking to young people, and I was talking to men and women, ex-combatants in Bougainville and in Papua New Guinea as well, on how much the people in both countries actually participate in the process, and it happens to be a political process. It's just politicians. Women are missing out, especially young people's voice is absent. And what I realized is that sometimes it's not a lack of interest. It's just the pathway is not there. The way this consultation process is shaped, it just inherently excludes groups. So you have to be a politician, let's say, to be in the highest decision making, which is called the joint supervisory body of these consultations. Now, how many young people are politicians in Bougainville? Zero. How many young people are politicians in Papua New Guinea? Zero. And it also excludes women because it's a political kind of the structure is political in a sense. You have to be a politician to be in the highest decision-making body called the JSP. Because Papua New Guinea Parliament does not have women, women are not in there. So it's sometimes not because of a lack of interest. It's the structures themselves are not designed in a way that's inclusive. So it has to be active, active kind of proactive approach on the side of those in power, those in authority, to design, structures and mechanisms in a way you bring young people in.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I would also like to circle back to the conversation we just had. Like one question: how often is the EC's role in rolling out registration, like common role updates? Is it electoral roll updates? How often should that be happening in every part of the? Because some people are turning 18, or some people are turning 20, or some people are turning 25 within the 5 years, right? And then so when we have a consistent common role, is it common role or electoral roll?
It's the same thing.
Okay, the electoral roll update should be happening every year, and there should be no questions asked about allocation of enough resources towards this at the provincial level, or if it's if it's the top level, then it's the top level of the authority taking this on board. And then we don't have to have this issue that we're having right now. It's like a donkey ears issue. We are repeating the same thing over and over and over again. We have not learned something from the past, and it's very, very frustrating to see the same thing happen over and over again. And I was just curious as to see if this process of
Yeah.
registering voters, or if this process of updating the common roll is something that happens every year within small localities all across PNG. Because if we have that, then we wouldn't have the issue that we have right now. What do you think about it? Is it
Yeah. So, like, for elections, like, the government has to understand that it's a process. It's a process of about 8 to 12 different stages that have to work together to have a good election. You just cannot come in the 11th hour, or you just cannot focus on just one process and try to expect the elections to be smooth. So in 2017, about 201 people were killed as a direct result of election-related violence.
That's correct.
So we looked at that. Most of that, the death, that violence origin had to do with names not being on a common roll. So someone shows up, his or her name is not on a common roll, ban stuff up because he's upset. Or someone shows up, his name is not on a common roll, and because election comes down to numbers, who gets elected comes down to numbers. So, and the tribe, starts destroying properties. And so following the 2017 election, the government sanctioned a study on how to improve these things. So I remember I was part of, I presented a paper and I was part of the conversation. In that room, almost everyone that was present, government, NGOs, researchers, electoral officials themselves, agreed that common roll is a major problem. And that should, people should start, the government should, start taking that seriously, and they didn't. They didn't, and that's how we end up now. And I'm kind of, one of the things I'm really afraid of with this election is lives being lost because of things as simple as getting the common roll right, and how that translates into violence is something I'm afraid of. Now, going back to common roll updates, so like first you need a census, national census, because national census registers the names and the birth dates. So you have a good estimate of how many people are 18, how many people are 25, or how many people will be turning 18 or 25 by the time election comes around. In Papua New Guinea, the last reliable census that was conducted was 2000. That's 20 years ago. They tried to conduct another census in 2011, and they did, but they did a terrible job. So even the National Statistics Office admitted that the 2011 common roll is inaccurate. So if you do that, the last common roll, at least reliable data, not common roll, census, data that you will have to rely on has to be 20 years old. So that's how outdated, the data is. And that's the data that the government used to create, like the seven districts just recently. And now you have 7, additional seats. And the opposition has taken that matter to the courts, tried to stop the election, and the Supreme Court just ruled yesterday that you cannot stop the election. But what people misunderstood is, that they thought that the opposition lost the case, but the opposition didn't lose the case. The opposition failed to stop the election. But the substantive matter, the question of whether the creation of the creation of the 7 new districts is constitutional or not, is still active. At one point, the Supreme Court will rule on that. And if the Supreme Court rules that the 7 new districts, the creation of the 7 new districts were unconstitutional because it relied on a faulty data. All right, so you use data to calculate whether you split a district into two. Now, if that happens, then it will affect like bounds of districts. You will have to go back to the original district, which means everyone that elected in these 7 new seats will be declared null and void automatically. And then you will have to go back, even for the original, seat, and you will conduct new elections. So, things like these are common sense. It's just that the government does not seem to follow common sense. Yeah, so first you needed census to be common sense is not common always. So first you need to have a correct census data, which is like 20 years outdated by 20 years in Papua New Guinea census. And then you need a common roll that should be updated at least mid-term. So you have 5 years in a parliament term, at least midway through the term, you register the voters, those that are eligible, those that turned 18, those are residing in, so there are different criteria that you use. But what sometimes happens is you also register people who will be turning 18 in the next 2.5 years. You also consider people who will be turning 25. So to vote, you have to be 18. To contest the election, you have to be 25. So at least come towards mid-term. The reason why you need that is so that after that you go through the cleansing process, trying to make sure that the data is correct. The process is you go back and put the list up in the districts and LLGs, and people come and check and see whether their names, after the common roll updating, right? The first stage is you go count people and who's turned 18 and who's turning 25 and things like that. And then after this are compiled, you send it back to the districts and LLGs and wards, and they put it up. So people come and check their names to see whether their names are up. The village recorded checks whether someone has already died and passed on. So you update so that another 2.5 years before elections for that process. But the election, well, I think what happened was the Papua New Guinea government didn't release funds that the Electoral Commission requested. And they did it towards the very end, like few months left. And that's why we are in this mess.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could talk about this for, more than an hour, because it's something that it keeps on happening. Even though there's like efforts being put into it, it's still, happening. And I think, I don't know when we will be able to change from that and start to head in the right direction, but that is something which is entirely dependent on the decision we're going to be making in the next couple of weeks when we stand at the booth, polling booth, and then cast our vote. I just wanted to bring your mind again to young people, and our focus is youth and youth participation in democracy in the last decade. And before I come to the part where it says last decade, I think in one of your articles, Asia and the Pacific Policy Society, I think you were one of the contributors to the article that was rated Critic Top 10 in 2021. There was a list of top 10 articles that were critiquing, some of the things within politics.
Out of the top 10, it was one, so it was good. I kept my point for the whole month.
Oh wow, that's amazing. So I was just looking through the internet, and I came across this, and you shared a very interesting view on that, and I think it's something that we can discuss. It's more like a foreign policy kind of discussion that you have going on in terms of how China and in Australia and the interest in the Pacific and all of that. That's another topic altogether that we'll hopefully have time in the future to talk about. But think in one of the articles, I think it's not that one. It's another article. To be honest, I don't know where. I didn't take note of the title of the article, but it says on top that politics in the age of uncertainty, and it has some kind of statistics. And one of the things that really interested me was ageism. Like there was something about ageism in there where people, have stereotype discrimination about another person because of their age group. Like, so it's ageism, AGEISM.
Right.
So I don't know if it was something that you also wrote about, or if it was a contribution from another author, but I found it within one of your writings, not one of your writings, in the
Right.
list of the writings that you were part of.
It's probably someone else.
Yes. So just to give a question, I won't really go into what the research was about, but I think it's also relevant. The topic of ageism is also relevant to PNG because when it comes to young people, they see young people and then they already think in their mind what this young person is gonna be doing or this young person is capable of. So they already have a preconceived. As soon as a young person comes to into a group, or they involve a young person, especially for those who are trying to stand for elections or any other matter for that, they see a young person and then they automatically have a concluded idea of where they stand, where the young person stands in the community and society, because of their age, because of how young, or because of who they are. So connecting that to what is happening in terms of the candidates really utilizing young people, do you think that's a mindset that they also unconsciously encourage in their precept towards how young people should participate? Like, if I want to stand for politics, and I'm below 30 and I want to stand for politics, all the big dogs will just look at me and then they will say, "Oh, you're a young person," and then they will have they will already have placed me in a category where they think I am suitable to be placed in. And so it's like, yeah, you're placing someone in a particular category just by looking at them, just by the age group, and say, "Oh, you are 7 years old, you're supposed to be playing video games. You are 14 years old, you're supposed to be whatever. Or you're 18 years old, you're supposed to be hanging out with your friends. You're already 18, you're supposed to be working already and not living with your parents." Yeah, so I'm just trying to connect that to how our young people are being treated when it comes to elections. Where do you think it's something, there's a connection in there somewhere along the line where unconsciously we place young people in a particular category of role and say, "Okay, you're a young person, your vote doesn't matter because you're a young person and you will just carry my bag, or you will just do my campaigns and you don't need to vote." That kind of mindset. Do you think it is something that's unconsciously been encouraged by our elder or even other young people in our community, just by looking at the scenario of everything that's happening?
Yeah, interesting comments. The unconscious bias, stereotype. Yeah, I think it partly has to do with our culture. Chiefs in a village are older men. Well, chiefs in a village are first men, and second they are older. And there are roles are defined. There is some things are just exclusively for women, some are for men. When there is a feast, young men are expected to do certain things. In my village, they are the ones that kind of go fishing, hunting, do everything. And then the women cook. The men, this is interesting, they just sit around and all they do is talk. That's all they do, man. I'm not, God. And they will have all the best food. It's like, yeah, the meat, like if you have a pig slaughtered, the meat goes to them. It's just unquestioned. You cannot question why men will just sit there and all they do is talk. And they will just talk about things that really they have no control over. They will talk about politics. They will talk about just about anything. And not, if someone is not talking, you expect, well, if someone is not contributing to the work and they're just talking, you would expect them to be talking about something useful to improve the, quality of the life in the village. But, this thing goes on and it's not questioned. And those that are joining might have, they have different experience back in their villages, but that's mine. Where, men just sit there and they talk. Young men have a defined responsibility. They shouldn't be there sitting among the men. They should be making things happen. They should be out there fishing, hunting, scraping coconut, chopping firewood, whatever it is to get the food on the table. Women are doing the cooking. So this men sit there and they just talk. So that's the very basic level. That's where we start. And then you just translate that into national politics. Yeah. So there is a certain age group that we expect to contest the election. That we expect them to speak on our behalf, and that the young people have a very have a defined responsibility that they shouldn't kind of trespass into contesting election or talking about politics and major issues, because that's kind of the province, or that's kind of the boundary of the older man, middle-aged man and above. So it goes pretty deep. Like it's not just something you can gloss over. It goes right back to where we are raised. It goes right back to the communities that we are raised, the culture that we come from. So it will. What I usually do when I'm back home, and I'm from the chief clan, like the paramount chief. We have like 7 clans, and I'm from the chief clan. And what I try to tell my dad and my uncle, who is the chief, is that politics is different. Government institutions are different. Just because we are the chief does not mean we get the entire village to do our bidding when it's a governmental issue. You want to talk about our chief, let's confine it to culture where it's relevant. But just in the village, there is no line between what is cultural and what is kind of modern state institution. It's just so like I remember this time where there was a candidate who was contesting, and he was from our village, but he was not from the chieftaincy. Like he wasn't from our tribe. He had to get permission from us to speak to his campaign. I don't get it. So like these structures, defined responsibilities, then easily just translates into what you are trying to do in the modern institutions. And that means excluding huge number of women. That means excluding huge number of young people, because there is pre-defined or defined roles and responsibility in the rural areas. So I think it will come down to, again, education. It will come down to awareness, basically empowering young people and women. But also pointing out to, those who are in a privileged position and think that this is their kind of their boundary, and this is their space, letting them know that no, it's everybody's space.
Wow. It's very always like informative when, I hear views from others, especially like yourself, who is very well versed in this, in area of politics. And before like we close, we are like 1 minute away from 8 o'clock, and if I can ask you to at least give me probably 2 more minutes, and then we can close it.
It's fine.
Okay, thank you. So to try to like wrap up our conversation, I know there's so many things that we have discussed, and there's so many that need to be taken apart and looked at. But like just from your point of view, I've seen how our democracy has evolved as a country, and I'm also concerned about how it is deteriorating in a sense, especially taking into consideration the values of democracy, what makes democracy work. And some of the things that make democracy, especially the two that interest me, is freedom to, let me see my notes. Yeah, democratic decision making and equality before the law. And these two values of democracy kind of like strikes a chord with me, because every time there's a democratic decision making, we observe during election, it's not democratic most of the time, as you can see. Like some of the people are being encouraged by their peers or by their clan, by their tribe to kind of like buy off their vote so that they give it to a particular person. And I don't think that supports, it's just my view, I don't think it supports democracy, if you get what I mean. So democratic decision making is being able to empower someone to be able to take the decision, make the decision on their own from their free will, and with a peace of mind. But most of the time it doesn't happen during elections, because you will see most of the people who are supporting a particular candidate can actually do block vote. They just put their families together, and then they just say, we are voting for this person, regardless of who you want to vote for. You don't have a choice. So I think that value is under attack in our country. And the second one is equality before the law. You see a lot of, I don't have to name names, I don't have to put someone on the spotlight, but I sometimes feel like there's two laws for PNG, like for the ones who are in power and for the ones who are not in power, like the ordinary citizens. So it is very concerning as for someone who supports democracy and wants to see a free, fair country that is progressing into the fullness that it should be experiencing, but having the setbacks and how we see democracy being played in our country, especially when it comes to elections. It is very important to know that. And I think maybe you will have something to say and add to this, but I feel like it is these two values are being under attack. They are under attack in the country, especially when we look at democracy. What would you say about that, or do you have a point of view that you want to share or add about it?
Yeah, I think the problem is we think about these things in abstract terms, and what I mean by that is, when you say equality before the law, people don't see how that is relevant, or they don't see how that, how that should be, why that is important. Why should there be equality before the law? Or that elections should be free and fair. Like, how does that directly affect our lives? So people don't think, in terms of this thing has a direct impact on our life, it's kind of just abstract. It really doesn't matter how we get a person into power, because we live our lives. We are not affected by, what happens in the parliament. So it's understanding that these things matter and that they affect the quality of your life. If there is, that understanding, if you can make that link, then it becomes important at a very personal level for you to try to do the right thing. And there was a book, or there is a book titled Why Nations Fail. And man, it's a really, really good book. I actually read it twice. I don't read books twice. So this was
Well,
good.
if that's the case, then I should look for it. If you read it twice, then I should definitely look for it.
You should definitely read that book. And these were written by two economists, but they made the argument that nations that prosper because of politics, equality before the law, electing the right people, not because of economics, because they said the economic institutions are set by the political class. The politics actually decides.
Yeah.
And that, that for me, and they used like cases going all the way back to like beginning of agriculture, all the way, ancient Iran, and all the way back to modern societies. And they sold out an institution or a society that respected authority, but also were serious about things like law and order to some extent, and having participation, free and fair participation actually leads to whether a nation fails or a nation prospers. So why is, first of all, why is electing good people into parliament important? It's important because they are the only people that get to make the laws, right? The law that affects your life. No one else in Papua New Guinea has the power to make laws. When you are voting, you are entrusting the law-making power of 9 million people in the hands of 111. Now it will be 118 because the government just created 7 new seats. So just imagine the fate of 9 million people decided by the wisdom of 111. That's why it's very serious.
Wow.
That's why it's very serious. That's why like voting really matters, because you are trying to find out of this 9 million Papua New Guineans. You're just trying to pull out your best 111. So it's not something you want to take lightly during elections. Yeah, I lost. What was the second one again?
Equality before the law. Is it? Or democratic decision making?
Yeah.
What
So,
you on the two values?
yeah. So like I was saying, it begins by we making the clear link between the people you are voting, the laws they make, and how that affects your life. Or the people you are voting, the laws they make or the policies they put in place, and how that affects your tax. How that affects, now that the government has started borrowing, they've increased. It's kind of complex, but like in the simplified version is this: government can borrow up to 60% of the budget that you have. So if your budget is 100 million, just for discussion's sake, let's keep it simple. The government now has amended the laws that allows them to borrow 60 million. All right, so it's the percentage calculated based on GDP, 60% of the GDP. So that's a very serious matter, because now the government can legally borrow so much money, and the payment of those, money will fall, repayment of the debt and interest will fall on the shoulders of young people, just in the next 10, 20 years, probably 40 years, you will continue to pay. Yeah, it was 35%, but amended and now 60%. Lane, it is correct. So that's why it has to matter. The only way they can repay that is they will have to increase the tax on you to collect enough money to repay that. So you see the decision you made, during election to elect this 111 have now made a law that directly affects the quality of life. So it's about making these links so that we know it's not just abstract and we just, even like I conduct live streams on Facebook where I talk to young people every Tuesday, and one of the things is to try to make these people, young people understand that your vote matters, what happens during the election matters, because it's not abstract. It has a very direct connection to the quality of life. Like even gender-based violence that's going on, and like taking ages to even get something done. You cannot do anything because that's the domain of the MP. It's the MP that gets to make the law. So you can, do all you want, shout all you want, write, criticize, laude, protest. It comes down to MP. That's why it's very important, like the decisions you make during the election is a very direct connection to what's happening in Papua New Guinea.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, that just puts a lot of things into perspective as to why our vote matters this election and why we should, go out there and make our vote count. Before I let you go, I just want to get your last view about, like, we didn't really touch on democracy, but it kind of like overlapped. The conversation kind of like overlapped as we were having the conversation. Since the last, I'd say 2 terms, say a decade, right?
Yeah.
Since the last decade, the past decade, 2012 until now, 2022. That's 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you think, what is your view? What would you say if I asked you, what is your view on the progress of generally youth participation in the election process, and then the state of democracy between the last decade and now we're seeing things? What would you say? Has it progressed? Has it regressed?
Right.
And what are the ways we could improve, like at our own level as individuals who are tuning in, not at the national level, not at the policy level, but at an individual level? Do you think that it has regressed? What are some of the ways that, a simple person like me, an individual, can do to make it better? If it has progressed, then how can I contribute to strengthen it and make it more stronger?
Right. Yeah, it's the last decade was like decade of my youth. I
think
very
most of the
personal.
90s kids
I
will
take it very
agree.
personal.
The late,
Well,
the late 80s
yeah,
and 90s kids will agree with you. Yeah.
partly joking, but uh, I'll say, like, the good thing about the last few years, maybe 5 years, is what internet has done. It's and there is a lot of like studies going into the impact of internet, social media, and democracy. And
Yeah. Wow.
it's let's just take this, socially related violence as an example.
Yeah.
It was there it was there for like ages.
That's true.
But it was restricted in communities because you would only hear stories about, if you ever got to hear about it, it's through someone who has traveled to a far, far province and came back and like, man, when I was here, this happened. But now it's like instant. Something happens, it's online. Now it's putting pressure on the leaders to act. They're not, they haven't been that active, but it won't be long before it looks really bad. I mean, it's already bad. It's actually creating a discussion with the gender-based violence committee that was established, and a report was submitted for the establishment of secretary. I don't think that would have been possible without internet. And then sometimes investigations actually begin after continuous reporting on social media and people sharing stories about an issue that, and it just cannot go away because people keep talking about it. And then eventually it looks bad on the leaders, political leaders, and then they take action. It has allowed people to leak information. Sometimes, it's fake, but, it comes with the territory. But sometimes it's true, and this information actually, media then picks it up, and then eventually people get to act on it. So in a way, I don't want to be pessimistic. I think we are moving in the right direction, balance of probability with probably more positives than negative. And I just want to be hopeful that we are moving in the right direction. Young people, we just talked about young people, but young people are just dominating social media right now. It is, you see, like we talked about how these structures are in place, and it has prevented young people from participating because it goes all the way back to your culture and your village where you're brought up. But then, we are now checking you are a woman. You are not supposed to be leading discussion. But here you are. Here you are. And you get in a man to talk to you. So,
well, that's how we have progressed, right? As with social media and
social media
decentralizing.
Yeah, social media kind of does not have rules on who says what. It does not have predetermined or predefined kind of structures and roles and responsibility. So that's the good thing about this generation, is that we just have to, teach people about their rights and awareness on why their voices matter. And I think the mediums of communication is changing, and we will see more and more young people, having their voices heard. There's going to be a lot.
Absolutely. I think this was a great conversation, and I feel like I want to speak to you more, continue this conversation, but I think we have passed that yeah, so we'll see how the next conversation will go, and then we'll see if we can be able to bring you again on to share about, because I really want to hear your viewpoints on women in politics as well. You have some interesting point of views there going on. But for now, I really thank you for your time.
Yep.
And maybe there's one thing that you want to share with young people who are going to be taking part in elections. And yeah.
Yeah, I would say just go out and vote. The candidate you vote may not win, but at least when decisions are made after 2020, you will say, I made my part in trying to push this, ship in the right direction. The person I wanted to win the election didn't, but I wasn't just spectating. I got involved and I did something. If they win, good enough. You also, because my audience mostly is university students, that's what my job was. So I tell them about the influence back in the village. Like with one phone call, they can change who their mom votes, or who their cousin votes, or even their tribe votes. So be involved. Be involved. You are educated. You have access to information that your people back in the village don't have. So with that information, that access, and that privileged kind of position that you have, that you are educated and they respect you back in the village. So that's an opportunity to, make a difference in who gets into parliament and eventually makes the decision that affects your life.
Yeah. So just for someone who is curious right now on the comments, probably you can help me answer this guy. So I shared my view before you go. I shared my view on late Sam Basil's son contesting his father's seat, and well, everyone has the right to contest, right? But I think that as a tradition, traditionally, being a politician and having your children grow up in that kind of environment doesn't necessarily give them the right to directly, feel that they should also take on that role as take over the position of their parents. But if they are capable of doing it and they're following the right processes and procedures to do it, then I think that's fine with me. But I shared my view that it shouldn't be. I mean, if the son wants to contest, then it should follow due procedures. But he is not the late Sam Basil. He is the late Sam Basil's son. So that doesn't necessarily fall into place in him contesting. And if he is contesting, then what are the procedures and protocols in place? And is it legal? Is it according to the law for the son or for anyone who is a family member to step in and,
Right.
at the eve of the election, right at the eve of election, because now it's like we have passed all the processes of, nomination and giving your name to whatever, making your intentions known to whichever political party or whichever job, if you are employed and stuff like that. So how do you think it's what does the law say about that? Like,
So
is it okay for the son to contest, or like for any other person to contest, especially when in this situation, or do you think they should wait and contest the next election following some kind of proper procedures and protocols?
So it's like it's legal. There's nothing. There's no law against him contesting the seat. It's not even contesting his father's seat. With the issue of rates, like parliament is dissolved, so no one is a representative of any seat at the moment. So is contesting the Morobe Open, which is open for everyone.
Is he contesting for Morobe Open? I thought it was Bulolo Open.
Sorry, pardon me, Bulolo Open. So is contesting for Bulolo Open. It's not against the law for him to do that. It's I think they are taking an opportunity that is kind of presented itself. Basil was popular, but he became even more popular with his death. And it's an opportunity, and the son wants to, take that opportunity and contest. I'm not against that. The only issue would be if he gets elected it's not going to be because people see any quality in him. It's going to be because Sam Basil was popular. He died in a very tragic accident. People are mourning, and it just makes sense to vote his son. It's kind of an expression of their grief by voting his son, which is not the best way to choose a leader. Sorry. And I'm sorry to say that. Choosing a leader comes down to the quality. Yes, somebody said sympathy votes. Yeah, that's exactly my point. Choosing a leader comes down to what has the individual done so far that gives you confidence that when he gets in, that he will make the right decision. It comes down to that. And I'm by saying this, I'm not saying, I'm against the son contesting. I'm not saying, sympathy votes, people shouldn't be voting in using sympathy votes, which is like expressing their grief by voting. I'm just saying it's not a right kind of frame of mind.
Yes.
Or not kind of the right criteria to decide who is the best leader. It is possible that someone who is really good might be contesting Bulolo Open. Someone who would have come in and, taken the job that Sam Basil did and taken to the next level and improve the quality of the life of the people. But, because people are expressing their grief, they just vote Sam Basil's son, and we miss out on the opportunity on getting the best person into parliament. It's about that. Like I said, we have 9 million people, and the people that get into parliament and they make the decision that affects the life of all 9 million is just 111. So you better make sure you get the right person in, because it's very, very, it's not even 1%, it's a 0.000005% who get to make the decision that affects the lives of 9 million people. So it's a very serious decision. So you have to ask yourself the question, whether voting Sam Basil's son because he is Sam Basil's son is the best decision to make. So it's up to the individual to decide. Personally, I don't think that's the best decision.
Okay.
I mean, if he's been doing, if he's been doing well, in the community, if he's got the qualities, and if people think, he's his father's son, but he is an individual, is his son to be capable, I have no problem with that. But just voting my son, who has not proven anything, is not even as good as me. You don't even know whether he's as good as me. But you're voting me because he's my son. Like, I would come back from my death and grave and say that's a wrong decision. Find someone else.
And we share this with all due respect, to the family and to everyone who is grieving. And as I'm part Morobe as well. He has served my people as well. When we are in hunger, he always, helps us because we are right at the border. So I want to take this time to share my sympathy and condolences to the family. And I shared my view in a light that, as Michael has fully and correctly expressed, that like we are not in the right frame of mindset, especially people. So what they will be voting will be more like a sympathy vote. But if he is a good candidate for the seat and he has the quality to do, I mean, by all means, stand for election. So as Michael has cleared, it is legal for anyone to stand for election, and including him as well. So that
we wish him all the luck.
Yeah, we wish him all the luck and all the best in this election. But thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate this conversation, and you have shared so much of your knowledge with us and your insight, and that is something that we, not a lot of people get for free. So I'm privileged to be able to have you join this conversation and share your knowledge with us. So I'm sure the young people will appreciate this conversation as well. And I thank you, and I wish you all the best in your studies. And I look forward to the next time I'm going to have you back on this show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right. You have a very wonderful afternoon, evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you everyone for joining. And make sure to share this video with your friends, your family, share it with on any platforms that you think will educate other people. And I really, really appreciate you joining me on this conversation. In this conversation, I hope that you've learned a thing or two from this conversation and be able to pass the knowledge to others around you, so that we can actually start to think for ourselves and start to make decisions that we think is best for us and for our families and for our community. And know that the people that you're going to be voting into parliament is going to be the ones representing us, as Michael said. So I thank each one of you for joining me on this live conversation, and I will see you again on Monday. So Monday is our next live conversation, and the guest is amazing. Is an absolute superstar, and you would like to tune in to not miss the announcement. All right, then. I wish you all a very lovely evening, and see you all again in the next live conversation. Thank you so much. Francisco out.